So today we discuss about the assignment that is of the 40 marks for this subject. So it is based on a software that is called as a PGP standard. So we will discuss that PGP standard, that how that PGP standard is working, how that is used to encrypt the data, and how that is used to decrypt the data. So actually the PGP standard that stands for uh, the pretty good privacy standard. So that is used for the encryption and decryption. So whenever any data that is sent it from user A to user B, for example, that is sent it with the help of this standard. The function of this standard is that to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. Whenever any data that is sent it from user A to user B, that is encrypted with the help of this standard. So that is used by so many applications like email applications or the softwares managing or maintaining emails. So for that, the PGP standard is used. So that is used to that is attached with that application, or that is attached with that particular software. And when any data that is sent it from user A to user B, so that is sent it with the help of the PGP standard, and that is encrypted using the PGP standard. Now, as far as the PGP standard is concerned, so it is also used some other system like mobile systems or you can say computers or laptops, or you can say mobiles. So that is attached with some application. For example, like we have different messengers like internet messengers. So they are using this standard. So whenever they want to send the data from user A to user B, for example, they send the data with the help of this standard. And when they send the data, so they encrypt the data using this standard. And this standard is every application that is going to encrypt the data, and that at the receiver and decrypt the data. Or for example, whenever the emails are sent it, so they are encrypted with the help of this standard, and at the receiver end they are decrypted. So there are different forms of this standard. Like for example, they are used by different email management systems, like for example Outlook, or some other email management systems which manages different emails. So when they use this standard, so they make the data securely send the data to other systems. For example, if they want to securely send the email to other system or other user, they use this standard as a standard to be used for the encryption and decryption. And this standard uses different algorithms also to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. As for example, we have discussed different types of encryption standards, like which are used to encrypt the data and decrypt the data. So with the help of this standard, they can encrypt the data and decrypt the data. So how they encrypt the data? Actually, they are using an application. For example, there's an email exchange. There's an application that is used to exchange the emails between the sender and the receiver, for example. So they are using such type of methods to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. So when they use such type of methods to encrypt the data and decrypt the data, then the emails which are sent it from user A to user B, they are securely sent it from user A to user B. For example, we have different different types of PGP uh, standards or techniques which are used, how actually the PGP standard is providing the secure functions to the data, which is our the email, for example, which is send it from user A to user B. So they are using different techniques, different functions. For example, they are using different encryption techniques, like as we discussed, hashing algorithms. So as we know that the hashing algorithms are those type of algorithms which are used to maintain the integrity into the data. For example, if any data that is sent it from user A to user B, for example, so it calculates the hash value from that, and then at the receiver end it recalculates that same hash value. If the hash value matches with the message which is received from the receiver, that means the message has not been modified. So in this way, this standard applies the hashing functions or the hashing uh, algorithms to make the data secure. And then it also compresses the data if any data requires to be sent it from user A to user B. So it compresses the data as well. So if you want to make the smaller size of the data so that it can be easily sent it from user A to user B, so then it compresses the data using the PGP standard. And then it also uses symmetric key cryptography or public key cryptography. So it depends on the requirement. As we know that there are the different requirements of the public key cryptography. So we have a symmetric encryption as well as a asymmetric encryption. So we provide uh, a symmetric encryption for that type of encryption where we are using same key from by the sender and by the receiver. And when we are using a different key by sender and receiver, then we use a public key cryptography or public key crypto system. So in the same way, the PGP standards are used to encrypt the data and decrypt the data using the, you can say, uh, application, which is sending the email from user A to user B. So that application has the PGP standard attached with it, and this standard uses the encryption and decryption methods to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. Now, as we discussed that there are the different applications which are using this standard as a encryption method or as a technique to provide the secure functions to the data. So there could be some desktop systems, or there could be some mobile systems like laptops and mobiles. They may be having some such type of applications, and they use such type of applications, and they attach the PGP standard to those applications, and then they provide encryption and decryption so that data would not be disclosed to the intruder or the attacker. So they encrypt the data, and at the sender end and at the receiver end, they decrypt the data. So with the help of this method, we are applying the security to the data. We are applying the, you can say, encryption to the data. So as far as the desktop systems are concerned, for example, we have different systems having different email applications installed, where, for example, we have Outlook or some other applications which are managing the emails, for example, and where it has a different plugins installed in those applications. So one of the plugin that is used to make the data secure, that is a PGP standard or PGP plugin. So that is attached with the application, or that is installed in the application. So whenever any email that is sent it from user A to user B, for example, so that is using that standard as an application, or that is a standard that is used to send the data from user A to user B. So in this way, we have different type of standards which are used to encrypt the data, to decrypt the data. So the PGP standard is the standard that is attached with the email application, and the email application encrypts the data using that standard, and then decrypts the data using that standard. Along with the encryption and decryption, it also provides some other functionalities as well, like for example, digitally signing the data, so that if we are encrypted, as you know that if we are encrypting the data with a private key, for example, so it digitally signs the data, so that it also verifies the data that the data that is received by the receiver, that authenticates, that verifies that if a particular message has been encrypted with a private key, for example, so then it is verified that it is a authenticated data. So in this way, we have different encryption methods, and different rules, are different standards are used, which are used to encrypt the data and decrypt the data. So one of the standard that is used to securely send the data, like an email, for example, that is a PGP standard. So which uses different versions of the PGP standard. For example, it can be for the Macintosh systems, it can be for the PC systems. So they can, along with the encryption, it also provides some compression as well. Like for example, PGP also uses some tools like PGP zip tool, which are used to compress the data and decompress the data. So the applications which are having the PGP standards, they provide the data encryption as well as data compression. So because an email, maybe it's of large size, so it needs uh, to compress the data so that it can be easily transmitted or send it to other system or other user. So in this way, they require some encryption methods, and some decryption methods, and also some compression methods, so that the data can be reduced and send it to other system or other user easily. So it uses different encryption compression algorithms to, along with the encryption system or encryption algorithms. Then we have some additional tools which are used by the PGP standard, like for example, PGP net share. That standard is actually used to uh, share the uh, share the data between different users, or share the files between different users. So that is net share. And when there's an PGP messaging also, which is used to send the encrypted messages to other user, for example, and then that is received by the receiver. So in this way, they can send the data and they can receive the data, and that is encrypted and decrypted by using the PGP standard. For example, it can be used by the PGP net share and PGP messaging, or for example, it can be used by whole disk, for example, to encrypt the data, to encrypt the entire desktop data or laptop data or any disk data. So if we want to send the data to other system, for example, then that is also used to encrypt the data, and that is also used to decrypt the data. Or for example, if you want to encrypt the data in a system, or whole data in a system, so then we can also use this standard as an encryption method to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. Further, we have some other tools like PGP zip tool. As we discussed, that PGP is also used to compress the data and along with the encryption and decryption, and it also sends encrypt the data uh, of whole data of a disk, or it can create a virtual disk from that, and then it can send the data to other system. So in this way, we have different types of PGP standards, and the function of the PGP standard is that it attaches itself to the file, it attaches itself to an application like an email application, and uh, it saves the data to other user in encrypted form or in the compressed form. So it uses both the tools or both the methods, both the techniques to secure the data or to provide secure functions in the data by providing encryption and decryption, and also by compressing the data. So as we discussed, it comes in different versions. It could be for the desktop system, it could be for the laptop or for some mobile system. So every application is using encrypting the data that may use this standard as a standard that is used to encrypt the data and decrypt the data. And then we have you can use this software from this site or this website or this link, so you can also access the software from that, and it could be for the Windows as well as Mac, Macintosh, Mac systems. So you can install that on your system, and you can create uh, keys, for example, private key and public key from that, and then encrypt the email with a private key, and then the receiver, for example, receive that email and decrypt the email with the public key, for example. Or for example, the public key, it encrypts the email with the public key, and then at the receiver and the data that is received, it decrypts that email with the private key, for example. So it has different versions, like it comes for the Windows platform and some other platforms uh, like Macintosh or some other systems. So the purpose of this software is that this is standard is that it is used to encrypt the data, and at the receiver end it is used to decrypt the data. And then, for example, we have uh, some some configuration we need to do when we are going to encrypt the data and decrypt the data. So, for example, we define a message. We give an input, the message to the software. For example, the PGP software or PGP standard. So it generates a public key and private key for that. So for example, if the public key is used for the encryption, then at the receiver end, the private key will be used for the decryption. Or for example, if the private key is used for the encryption, and then at the receiver end, the public key will be used for the decryption. So in this way, we have different uh, versions of the PGP standard. So it comes in different licensing. Uh, uh, for example, it can be you can say used for freeware or some more features. If we need to have required to have more features, then we can also purchase their software or license for the PGP standard. So in this way, we can encrypt the email using a PGP standard. So you can see here there's a window is open here, which is used to generate, which is used to give an input to the PGP standard or to the file. So whenever an public key is given an input to a file or to a message, for example, then it is encrypted with that message or with an email. And then we have for example, here we can also generate a private key from that. And once we have a pair of public key and private key, then we can encrypt the data using these keys, and then at the receiver end that can be decrypted. So for example, we have an actual file here, for example, that is used to encrypt the data, or uh, or at the receiver end, for example, when it send it to that user, to another user, then at receiver end it decrypts that file. So in this way we have different types of users, different types of data. For example, it could be some message, for example, so that could be encrypted, and then at the receiver end that can be decrypted. Or for example, it could be an email, for example, so when it's sent it by the email application, so that is encrypted with this standard. And then at the receiver end, when that particular email is received, so that is decrypted by the user or by the application. So in this way, we can use this application as a tool or as a method to encrypt the data and to decrypt the data. So we have uh, you can use these different sources or links for downloading the PGP standard or PGP software, and then you can apply that on an email. You can apply that on a message, or for example, or you can also apply that on a file, for example. So you can use this standard for encrypting the message, and then it will securely send the message to other user, or it will securely send an email to other user. For sending the data to other user, uh, we require some standards like PGP standards, which are used to encrypt the data and which are used to decrypt the data. So if you have any question up to now, then you can also ask. Have you any question?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so let's discuss about the assignment that is of the 40 marks. So I'll discuss the assignment which is based on the PGP standard. Like for example, here, so can you see the, okay, you can ask the question. Uh,
Sir, my question is, sir, is this your first assignment, or you have given before any assignment too?
It's an assignment that is of the 40 marks. Okay, so
Sir, this
uh,
complete assignment is of 40 marks.
yes. So you need to have an application that is a PGP standard. So you use that particular software to encrypt the message. For example, can you see this assignment on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I discussed that what you have to do in the assignment, and then for example, this assignment is actually that is of the 40 marks. So you have to create an email account, for example, with the initials like first name and the last name, your first name and the last name, for example. And then after that, creating account, you use a particular PGP software. PGP software. You install the PGP software in your system, and then you will create a pair of keys. Like for example, as I also demonstrate you that how different keys are generated using a PGP standard. So you will create a pair of keys for that. So in this way, you can create a private key and public key pair for an application. And then after that, you need to configure the PGP standard or PGP software. So that will then you have to save the pair which you have created for the encryption and decryption. And then for example, you can work this assignment as a group of two. For example, if you have created an email account, and your friend has created or your colleague has created an email account, so you will send, and after creating the you can say public key, for example, you can save that and send that public key to your uh, friend, for example. So when it receives that public key, so you can keep the private key with yourself and send the public key to another email account that is of your friend, for example. And then you encrypt the email with the private key, and then then you send that message again to your friend. And then now he has the public key. Now he will be able to decrypt the email or decrypt the message using that public. So in this way, you can encrypt the message using a public key and private key. For example, you have a message. In this way, you can create different messages. For example, you are creating a message which are uh, which you are encrypting with a private key, and then send that to your email to your friend account, and then it has the public key. Now he can decrypt that email. And then for example, if there's a message, another message, for example, you have a public key. For example, you keep yourself the public key. Now your friend has private key, for example. So when you encrypt the email with that public key, and your friend will decrypt that email with that with the private key, for example. Or for example, there's a message you encrypt with the private key and send that to your friend, and then it will decrypt that with the public key that he has received. Now you have to answer different questions after doing that task in the assignment. For example, you have to answer like who can read your message, or uh, or who can you are sending the message you are sending, who is the user which is receiving that message. So you have to ensure that the authenticated user has received your message. And then, for example, when the message is received, then you can decrypt the message using a private key, or you can decrypt the message with a public key. And then you also uh, need to you can say know that what the message is actually, which is sent it from the user A to user B, because it is actually the message which is sent it in the encrypted form. So you need to encrypt that message using for example, private key and public key. For example, if you are a user, a legitimate user, which are sending the message to other user, and the receiver, which is receiving the message and which is a legitimate user, and then he can only be able to encrypt the message and decrypt the message. So in this way, you have different, you can say, emails can be messages can be generated, and these messages can be encrypted and decrypted using a private key, which are generated by the standard, or generated by the software. Like for example, in this way, you can also create using a sneak email software to uh, to analyze anonymous email. For example, it could be an unauthorized. It could be coming from any anonymous user, which is not giving a particular name. So sometimes you also observe that whenever you receive emails from different users or different people, so you can also may receive some emails which are anonymous emails. So it may be possible that these emails could could be some could have some virus attached to them, or you can say malware attached to them. And then maybe when you use that, or when you access that, and that would be installing some software or some virus into your system, and then they can get the critical information from the system, and then you send that information to the attacker, or to the intruder. So in this way, you need to identify that particular anomalous email, that either that anonymous email is a email that is actually the email that is not having a particular virus attached to that, or having a particular you can say a file that may be harmful to uh, for the user or for the system. So it requires something like that. So you have to examine different features for that. Like for example, if there's an anonymous email, then you have to read the if it is in encrypted form, then at the receiver, and then you, after decrypting that, you have to uh, you have to uh, read the message, that what's actually the message from that email, or for example, who is sending that email, because it is actually anonymous email. Now you have to find out that who has sent it the email. So once you have find out that who has sent it the email, then you can also identify that who, either that is actually the email that is coming from a legitimate user or not. So that with the help of this method, you can also you can also use some methods like the PGP standards, which are used to encrypt the message, and then that message can only be decrypted by the legitimate user to which you have sent it a key, or who has the private key to decrypt the email, or for example, who has the public key which you have sent it to him. So that's why we say that uh, we can do this with the help of some software or some application to find out that particular email has been sent it, or sent it by unauthorized user, or sent it by, you can say, anonymous user. So you can do that with the help of with the help of you can say PGP standard, you can also encrypt the message and decrypt the message. So in this way, uh, there could be a message that could be encrypted and decrypted, or there could be an anonymous email that could be encrypted or decrypted. So that could be, for example, some file or malicious file that can harm to the system. So you can also identify that particular file, and then you can also encrypt the file using you can say PGP standard, or then at the receiver end you can decrypt the file. So in this way, you have different methods can be used for encrypting the message and for decrypting the message. So you can apply these different methods for encryption and decryption. Then you have to answer these questions like how you find the PGP standard as a secure standard, and if any software or